Hello and welcome to this James the Bike Guy, where today we're getting the chance to take a look at a bike that I'm pretty excited about, a bike that has just gotten released and totally redone for 2023. And in fact, this is one of the most popular and top selling road bikes out on the market. In front of us here today is the 2023 Trek Domani SL5. Now this is in its fourth generation, and in this video we're going to talk about the new features and designs of this bike. We'll talk a bit about how it compares to the old one, as well as the other bikes in Trek's lineup. Then we'll go through the features to find out exactly what it weighs. So if this kind of thing is interesting to you, I suggest you stick around and let's check out this Domani together. So we'll start off by talking about Trek's Domani series. So in case you don't know, the Trek Domani is in its fourth generation. This is the newest and brand new bike. And in fact, myself, I owned the first generation as well as the second generation and really enjoyed both of them before skipping out on the third. But now having a look at the fourth generation, it really has me intrigued. So a couple of things to talk about. The Trek Domani is in Trek's lineup of road bikes, in which case they go from aero to full-on gravel. And what the Domani does is it basically bridges the gap between a performance bike and a gravel bike, as well as endurance. So this bike, as you can see, has a head tube that is relatively tall, a reach that's relatively short, coming in with a reach of 377 and a stack of 591. Those numbers are totally unchanged from Gen 3, and in fact, when you look at the rest of the spec sheet, almost every geometry number or tube number is virtually identical, so this should handle similarly to last year's or the previous generation. And in this frame, it then allows for frame clearance up to 38 millimeter tires coming fresh with 32s. So it allows the bike to blend kind of that performance that you get out of their Amanda lightweight climbing performance bike without going full-on gravel like you get on the Checkpoint. Now this Domani came out initially to compete against bikes such as the Giant Defy and the Specialized Roubaix, and it is a classics winning race bike on cobblestones. And for 2023 they made some real improvements to the bike, including losing some weight. This one should come in the SL variant about 300 grams lighter for the frame than the prior generation, and that carries forward in their SL as well. This brings me to talking a bit about those two numbers. So you'll see this says SL5 on it. So the SL, the letters, that indicates the frame quality. So in the Domani series, they have AL for their aluminum versions, SL for the entry-level 500 series carbon fiber frame, and then they have their SLR, which is their lightest and fastest 800 series frame. And so the SL comes with virtually all the same technology as that SLR, but a slightly heavier frame and not quite the same fine finishings that you get on that absolute top-end bike. Now, for 2023, to help lose weight but still make this ride really well, they adjusted what they call their ISO-speed technology. Essentially what this is this is a seat tube decoupler where the seat tube itself gets decoupled from the top tube and frame through a bearing system that's under this cap. That allows the back end to have some flex and compliance to it, but it doesn't affect the handling or the stiffness of the bike because laterally everything is still held together. They also then ahead and changed up the front end of the bike with this integrated cockpit, and they removed the ISO speed that was on the front end. Now, in the first generation of this bike, it was ISO speed in the rear only, but it ran much skinnier tires back then. I think the max back when I had that first gen was 28, whereas this bike now comes with 32 millimeters out of the box. And one of the complaints on that bike was that the back end was plush and the front was not quite as comfortable, and so it felt slightly like a mismatch. Going into the Generation 2 and Generation 3, they added an ISO speed in the front end, which added some weight, added some complexity, especially to that steer tube and the fork, but it helped smooth out the ride. Now, for the fourth generation, they've added in this much more aerodynamic integrated cockpit, which does look really neat and tidy in my opinion. and they're relying on some wider tires and a different layup to that front fork to be able to get the same compliance out of the front end, but without having to have that extra complication. Cool thing that's additionally featured up on the top is you'll see we've got a mount for a top tube bag that used to only be on their aluminum bikes. It's nice to have this on the carbon fiber one as well. And then when we go down into the center, you'll see the party trick that's been here since Gen 2, Gen 3, and now Gen 4. That is frame storage. So this door comes off, and with the door off, you'll see that they've got what's called a bits bag. This is essentially a Bontrager bag that can open up, looks kind of like a burrito, and you can put your tools, your CO2, your tube into there, and then stuff that into the frame of the bike. Oh, and something real neat about this integrated frame storage that I noticed while putting the bits bag back in, you see that little plastic mount there? That's actually there for a Di2 battery if this was a Shimano electronic shift. So it's pretty neat that that gets integrated in there, and you'll see the small little screws holding it together to help both with the cable routing that you can see tightly integrated in, all running through tubes so they don't rattle. That's like a soft rubber liner, as well as that means when you send the cables in through the head tube and down, you're not going to have to worry about fishing cables. Really cool integration that I just noticed before putting this all back together. Through the center is a threaded T47 bottom bracket that I know all of you will love for the additional durability and reliability of a threaded, but the ability to run larger size bearings. And then out back is a 12 by 142 millimeter through axle and a 12 by 100 millimeter through axle up front. The last things to mention is, of course, this is capable of running fenders both on the front and the rear. And with fenders, your max tire size on this bike is 35 millimeter wide tires, and without, you can run up to 38 millimeter. So as I'm sure you could tell, I'm pretty excited about the bike, and those changes to the frame are sure something. But now let's talk about the parts. So this cockpit, because this is an SL5 and a more entry-level variant of the carbon fiber frame, is going to be a relatively standard alloy setup. You still get this integrated stem, which is real neat because it's an alloy stem. This is two-piece bar and stem combo. But when you look underneath, that is how they're routing the cables. So you get to run cables traditionally, then it clips just underneath the stem to go in through the head tube, making for a nice clean look and easy to adjust. And then your handlebars are going to be the Bontrager Elite ISOZone handlebars with the VR SF shape. And what that means is this is a short and shallow handlebar, so it's got a 75 millimeter reach and then a 128 millimeter drop. So that's distance here and then to here. And then out back is going to be the Bontrager Verse saddle. This saddle is okay, but not my favorite. You know, different fits for different rumps, and that's mounted up on a carbon fiber seat post. This seat post utilizes their KVF2 tube shape, and that is where the back is a little bit flat, making a truncated airfoil, similar to what you see on the rest of the bike, helping with its aerodynamics, but truncated on the back there, carbon fiber post going into that ISO speed. Just one more thing to highlight with the ISO speed, because it decouples the whole seat tube, that means the compliance and the way that the bike's going to ride is the same virtually regardless of saddle height. So you don't get the setup where some bikes that just rely on the seat post to be flexible, the higher the saddle, the more comfy the bike is, the lower the saddle, the harsher it is. That ISO speed helps to dial all that in. And then it's set up with a Shimano 105 drivetrain. Now this is the 2x11 speed setup. So this is not the newest 2x12 speed electronic shifting. That comes on a higher level version of this bike, but you have a nice wide range 11 to 34 tooth cassette out back, 50-34 up front, and with that, that means a 1-to-1 gear ratio, as well as you've got that 50-11 for some pretty high speed descents. Shifting is then done courtesy of the Shimano 105 shift and brake levers. So these levers have an inside button to shift it to harder gear. The whole lever over goes to an easier gear. And then when you pull back on the brakes, that operates hydraulic 2-piston calipers, both on the front and the rear, with the right side operating rear and left operating front. And the last thing to talk about on the bike are the Bontrager Paradigm alloy wheels. This is an alloy double-walled wheel. It is tubeless ready and comes out of the box tubeless with the Bontrager R3 tires, also tubeless, in a size 700 by 32. So I actually use these R3 tires on my road bike. I really enjoy them. It's a nice fast rolling tire and they're reasonably inexpensive to replace, which is nice to have. And the bike is set up with clearance up to 38mm tires without fenders or 35 with fenders installed. So now that we've taken a look at all these features and designs, let's go ahead and find out what this bike weighs. The actual weight of the Gen 4 Domani SL5 in a size 58 comes in and weighs 19.88 pounds. And this is interesting to note because I weighed the 2022 version with the old frame and it came in at 20.08 pounds in a size 48. So a much smaller bike, although only 90 grams heavier than the new model. So I would imagine in a proper size, the new model would weigh in at that claimed 300 grams lighter, just like Trek said. Thanks so much for checking out this 2023 Gen 4 Trek Domani SL5. Go ahead and let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Let me know what you think about this bike. Are there major improvements over the prior generation, or is there something missing on this that you wish it still had? While you're at it, browse the channel and definitely hit subscribe to see more videos like this in the future as well.